Good day to everybody in TV land. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Basse Update. Today joining me to my right, Don Matthews. Welcome, Don.
Good, great to be here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about a couple things, and we're going to start out first with Harvest Fair. We're recording this on September 18th, and Harvest Fair was on September 16th. And we had a great Harvest Fair, very nice turnout. I was just amazed at how many kids we had. You know, when I saw those groups down, you saw them too come through there. There was 2 or 3 adults, grandparents or parents, and then there was like 4 kids, 6 kids. There was a multitude of families that were kind of joined together and had coming out together. But I saw a great amount of people in the house, and of course they came in there because the ladies did some great bread, and they had some dropped donuts, and they had some apple butter, and they had all kinds of goodies in there. And of course it smelled great. A little bit warm, but that was good. People kind of passed through. It was okay for everybody else, but the poor ladies in the house, interpreting the house, since they're baking there, we have a cast iron oven there and a stove, and of course it gets very warm, but then it stays warm for quite a while. But I was great in the house. Out at the 3-bay shed, which we were doing all kinds of things. We did the apple pressing, making apple cider, and then we press it, we crunch up the apples, and then we had about 13 bushel. I think we went through about 10. I think people got a little tired. We had a little help. We would like to thank the 3 gals that helped us from one family. They were real workaholics, did a great job and didn't give up. They were there for I think an hour and a half or 2 hours. And
very curious about everything.
And inquisitive about what was going on and how it was worked and what, can I do that? I mean, you know, a lot of times kids will watch you, but they don't want to necessarily participate. But the 3 young ladies, I think the oldest was an 8th grader, a 4th or 5th grader, and then maybe there was a 2nd or 1st grader there, but very nice family. Finally, their grandparents had to take them away because they had to go home after all that work and do chores. Don and I were kind of amazed. Their father let them off for chores in the morning because they could come out. I guess they didn't know they're going to work that hard, but I said, you mean you're going to go home and do chores? They said yes. Also like to thank our 4-H group. Had some volunteers that helped at the gate, and they worked there till 1:30. A nice young lady and her 2 daughters were there and worked the gate, did a really nice job. I'd like to thank them for all their work. And we had the extra benefit in the 3-bay shed. This year we had ice cream mix left over from our festival because we had a kind of a stormy day, and we didn't use up all of our ice cream mix, and so we made ice cream. And was it a hit on a hot day between the cider and the ice cream?
Worked out well.
And we
with
made
apple butter too.
Yeah, that was the beauty of it, was that little apple butter. And I told everybody it's like apple pie a la mode without the crust. So it was great. Don had a nice experience. He was working on the schnitzel bunk, the woodworking, working on actually a spoon for one of our friends that are friends to Historic Point Basse. And Don, why don't you talk about, you were talking about, you and Jim were going up to the MOPSI conference in November 9th through the 11th in Sauter Village in Archbold, Ohio. And you and Jim are taking a barrel making class, coopering, yes. and just relate to what your conversation, you started talking to somebody and all of a sudden other things came to light.
Yes, typically when people come into the Carpenter area or the Sawyer area, that's another whole story. I won't get into that. But anyway, we try to explain to them what some of the tools did. Some are quite unusual. They might not have seen them in a long time, and so we give everyone a little tour. You know, that this is the drill press for drilling holes to, and then you chisel out to make square holes for mortise and tending, and this is the furrow and what to do with that, and all the different chisels, and we got around to talking about coopering tools and the fact that about 2 years ago Southwood County Historical gave us a lot of their seconds. Basically, if they duplicated a display, then we got the leftovers, and a lot of them were parts and pieces, and I said that we only had a couple things from cooperage, but we're still looking on it. And come to find out, the man I was talking to, he says, we got started talking, and it seemed like he knew a lot about coopering, and then I said, well, how do you know this? And he said that his grandfather served a cooperage apprenticeship in Germany, and then his father took over the trade, and then he and his brother worked, getting cattails, because you use cattails, you take them and you dry them, and I think they called it leachage. Anyway, when it's dried, it's called that name, and then you put it in there then it swells up. Put it in the joints, and then when it swells up, it seals it, makes it watertight. And then he says, well, my brother is over there, he knows more about it. So then we had about probably a half-hour talk about all the different things with cooperage, and I shared that Jim Nichols and I are going to be taking a cooperage class at Sauter Village in Ohio. And he says, well, after you get done with that class, just call and we'll share stories and share techniques, and so hopefully in the future we can have a display on cooperage and have the tools there and maybe make some demonstrations on that. And he shared that part of the master test of the cooper trade is to make a oval barrel, and that's the top. If you look at the top, or if it's laying down the front, if it's instead of being round, it's oval, and that's the height of the cooperage craft. If you can make an oval barrel,
you can imagine how hard that would be.
Yes.
Because just imagine pounding these rings now. Now you got an oval, not a round,
mm-hmm.
and it would be quite a project. But that was the kind of interchange or whatever we have down there a lot of times. Somebody will come into the shop, and I think it happens in every building, but it tends to happen probably more so in the 3-bay shed. I'm certain that Diane would talk about things happening in the house. Somebody comes in, oh, I remember that, or Grandma had one like that, or I've got one at home that's maybe better or different or something like that. But I think since I'm hanging around maybe more of the 3-bay shed, I get a little bit more of that people come in with ideas, and Grandpa did this, like with this cooperage and everything. So it'll be kind of nice because Jim and Don are going to this MOMC, and they have a pre-conference workshop sort of thing, and they're going to make buckets. And a bucket is probably something that it's possible to do in a day's session. You're certainly not going to make a barrel. That's too complicated, because I saw this barrel maker we used to have here years ago. He had to have a fire in there when he wanted to drop these rings and everything, and he had a kind of a ceremony, because when they lit the fire under there to make this thing expand or something, then these rings would drop, and then he'd pound them down as he was going, and he had to go back to farming. Unfortunately, the guy, his wife says, well, we'd like to come, but we actually got to go farm. But he actually made a couple barrels here during the whole weekend, so it took him from Saturday all day, and then Sunday afternoon he was like at 2 or 3 o'clock he was finally finishing his barrel. But he was just making like powder keg sized barrels. He wasn't making huge barrels or anything. But so it'll be kind of nice to see how the buckets come back, because you got the bottom half of a barrel, if you want to put it in that regard, right?
We were talking about a couple years ago about wanting some more wood buckets for the ladies in the house, and for demonstrating out there. Because one thing that I learned is that if you ever look at a barrel, and if it has rivets, or not rivets, but basically if the ring is attached to the barrel in any way, that's cheating. That ring on that barrel is supposed to be constructed. The blacksmith is supposed to make it almost like hooked on top. So as it goes down, it won't come back up again.
Yeah. Well, I know that our barrels out at Historic Point Basse are accurate, because once in a while, if they dry out too much, the rings fall off of them. So I know they're not. But I have seen, and as all of us have seen, different places where they've tacked them on or something. And I think it's either cheating, or maybe it's closer to mass production or something, where they don't want to take the time or finesse to do it right, sort of thing. So that's one of those nice happenstances that comes out of one of these events, when people come up to you and talk to you about it. And then it just so happens that 2 of our members are going to a coopering class, so that fell right into place. So that was good.
That same day, another lady said that Well, I have a shaving horse or a schnitzel bunk in the basement of our house. It's been there for like 40 years. It's like, so there's, you get leads on some of these things, and sometimes they come to the site because what do you do with, a lot of people are finding out what do they do with this thing when people get older, and it's probably the best place to have it is in a museum type. We don't like to call ourselves a museum. We're outdoor
living history.
Living history.
And the beauty of what we have is we can use what we have, which is kind of nice. I mean, the ladies are using the cast iron loaf pans and everything in the house, and the cast iron skillets and all that sort of thing. You're using the tools and the schnitzel bunks. I mean, the one you were sitting on that day, somebody had given it to us from Plover area, and so. Yes. We're using those sort of things. Now, if something's a little fragile, maybe a tool or something will maybe hang it on the wall and we won't use it, but we'll, or we can make a duplicate or a copy out of it if it's possible, that sort of thing. But that's the sort of thing that went on, and I know there was a good time. Everybody, I was up by the schoolhouse, and there was lots of people touring up there, and the ladies from the Master Gardeners were interpreting the gardens, and they were not selling, but giving away Jerusalem artichoke and horseradish root, and trying to clean out the garden a little bit because the next week or so it's pretty much done. The tomatoes I think there's a few tomatoes ripening, but those ladies did a wonderful job. And wherever you went on the site, I know Skip was in the barn, and I was surprised how many people were in there. And of course, he was interpreting the man seat or whatever you want to call it that went across the river on a cable, same sort of cable that the ferry went across on, and we're going to interpret it now going across the creek because across the river there's logistics and navigation things and all that, and
the time period would be
and you can't do it, and how would you get it back from one side to the other? So we're going to do a little demo like over the creek, so that'll be something you can look forward to probably in the next couple months, the way Skip had talked that he's going to get at it. But let's talk about Spirit Walk. Spirit Walk is October 21st and 28th. It's 2 Saturdays in a row, and it starts the first group goes out at 6 p.m. The last group goes out at 8:30 p.m. So it's basically from about 6 to 9:30, but the last group goes out at 8:30. So we suggest if you've got younger kids, or if there's somebody that has issues walking, because we don't have even ground out there, folks. It's kind of level, but it's not perfect. I mean, we even trip up ourselves once in a while when you're walking around the groundhog or something digs a hole or something. So we suggest if you got young children or older folks, come early. Well, the sun is out yet, and before it sets, it's usually around 7 or so, and the sun sets. Then it's pretty dark out there, and then you go around. And of course, it's led with a lantern or candle lantern or a kerosene lantern. There's a leader, and there's somebody at the back of the group. So there'll be groups of, usually we like to keep it 8 to 12, and they go out with a leader and they explain a little bit as they're going along, and about before you get to each stop. Usually you have about 8 stops. And what you don't have to worry about, there's nobody's going to grab you.
Right.
There's nothing like that. It's not scary. It's haunted history. It's history, but it's a little eerie because of the way that maybe the person died or something happened to them. So you don't have to worry about that sort of thing. So it's appropriate, I think, for almost all age groups. Now, would a 2-year-old like it? Probably not. They're probably going to get bored on it. But I'd say any child from about 4 or 5 up. But a lot of times families come there and they bring their 2-year-old. So, I mean, we welcome anybody.
Most of the stories are only, 3 to 5 minutes long. So it cuts down on getting bored. But it all depends on the person, too. I've known some young people that really get interested in these stories. And that's mostly what they are, stories or songs or ballads.
Right. And like Don was saying, we have about 8 stops, and it's about 3 to 5 minutes per stop. So about 50 minutes to an hour to make a round. And we have about 6 guides. So, one group goes out, 10 minutes later, the next group goes out. And this year I'll be in the barn. Last year I think I was in France, France or someplace like that. I wasn't around last year, but I'll be in the barn, and then one of our ladies, Bev Ross, will be in the house playing Mrs. Wakely, and Tom will be down. Tom's going to be doing one this year. We usually take a year off or so, and so everything you come down to see. Now, if you said, Oh, I was there the last 2 years. You're not going to hear something the same because we rotate. It's at least a minimum of 3-year rotation. So you're not going to hear something that you heard recently. So, and there's always new stories coming up. And there'll be somebody in the cabin. We've got a Civil War soldier. Depending on what buildings, we may put him in a building or he'll be out by a campfire. We'll have somebody probably in the bunkhouse. And we've got Steve and Mike from Community Theater. They'll be doing, they're well looked forward to because they do such a great job. You know, they've been acting for so many years. They've really got the intonations and everything just perfectly. But I think that you'll notice that there'll be a lot of things. Somebody will be in the schoolhouse. Rhonda Whetstone's coming out and telling some stories this year, and I think she'll be in the schoolhouse. Lots of activities out there for you to do. Very reasonable, $4 for adults. I think it's $2 for students. You can come out, whole family can come out. You got hot apple cider. Hot apple cider. We pressed it now just over Harvest Fair. Put it in the freezer, so we're going to have plenty. I think we got 10 or 12 gallons in the freezer. So we'll have hot apple cider for you. We have a little bit of storytelling before you go out on it while you're waiting for your next group to go out. That's going to be a lot of things going on. So you never have to wait, usually much more than about half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. So it'll be...
Sit around a campfire.
Sit around a campfire, you'll be plenty warm and everything. Now, this goes rain or shine. Well, we really haven't over the years had only a little minuscule amount of rain. The characters have more problem with the rain than the public. The public can bring umbrellas or whatever you want to bring. So you're protected from the rain, but the characters, if they happen to be outside, don't have that advantage. So they have to hopefully be in a building or whatever. Is that what we're talking? So I think you're going to find the day to be fun. Well, we have a lot of people, and I've noticed over the years, one group will come out, and the next weekend, like this is the 21st of October and the 28th, the next weekend, they bring some other friends there. I've noticed that a couple times where sometimes when you're a character, you don't quite recognize it, but I recognize it because it gets a little darker, but I recognize, oh, those people were here last week, but they brought some other family members or somebody was visiting from out of town, or some people just like it so much. Oh, we also have 2 witches there. The witches will be back. And they'll be by the bridge, so be careful when you go in there, and they really
That's
do.
the only kind of scary part, but like Mike says, they don't come out and touch you at all.
Yeah, they don't grab you or anything like that. So it's a good time. Spirit Walk, October 21st and 28th. 6 o'clock we start. First group goes out at 6. You can get there 5:30, quarter to 6, and they send them out in kind of the order they do. They do come there. You can make reservations. You can give us a call or check our send us an email or something like that, or check our website, because sometimes we have scout groups or Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, young adult Christian groups from their church groups that'll come out, and they maybe want to come out at 7 o'clock. Well, we can make a reservation if we know in advance. If you come out at 7 o'clock and say you want to go out at 7, you may have 3 groups ahead of you. I mean, they go out in 10-minute intervals so we don't bump into each other, but I think you'll enjoy it. It's haunted history at its best. For me, I think one of the more enjoyable things we do, I enjoy everything I do out there, but I think I enjoy it as much or more than most things, just kind of the reaction you see on people's faces. I think it's rewarding. I think it's almost like whodunit, but darker and a different time of the day or something. Maybe we'll have to do a whodunit at night. It might be kind of fun to do that sort of thing.
Don't you think it's becoming one of our more popular
Oh, I think
events?
so. Yeah, I think we have a capacity limit. And I don't think we've ever went over it, but we've gotten awful close sometimes.
The year before last, there was people that left because it just was too many. I think we should really consider doing it more days.
Yeah,
so
we may have to check on it. Maybe this will be our testing year. Because I remember some years where we had groups and we had to combine groups towards the end of the evening. We've had 21 people in a group. Now that's a big group. You get them into a building, cabin, they can maybe get in. The house is pretty hard because we don't use the parlor really. We're using the kitchen kind of for the traffic flow. It's pretty hard to get 21 in there, but usually 21 means there's 4 or 5 or 6 kids, and then the rest are adults. But 21, we try to keep it, like I say, 8 to 12, but 21 is groups as big as that we've had in the past. So
maybe if you do come to Spirit Walk, just mention if you'd like it on a different day, or if you think you would. You've talked to people that might want to come, but they can't that night. It'd be good for us to get some feedback on it.
Yeah, the feedback is important. Maybe we do it Saturday, and one weekend we do a Saturday and Sunday, and maybe the next weekend just a Saturday or something like that to try to even it out, because Saturdays don't work for everybody. So
Right.
it might be a good opportunity. So Spirit Walk, October 21st and 28th, 6 o'clock p.m. Last group goes out at 8:30 p.m. Thanks, Don, for sitting in
welcome.
today for a Historic Point Basse update. Don't forget, folks, too, if you've missed only one cooking class, we have 3 more to come. And they're on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock at Historic Point Basse site. And this next one will be on the 19th, Tuesday the 19th, and then it's the Tuesday after that, and then the Tuesday after that is like October 3rd or something like that. So it's the next 3 Tuesdays. And if you get a chance, you can find out about cast iron cooking, all different aspects of it. And then, of course, on the third Tuesday, they go into the house and they use the stove in the house, the historic stove, and learn how to cook with cast iron stove and all those aspects of it. The class is open yet, so if you want to come out this Tuesday, we're filming this on the 18th. If you want to come out the 19th, otherwise the 26th, you're welcome at any of these. Come out to our cooking class. Tom Bramer is in charge of that, and there's a lot of volunteers that also work with them. Always room for you with the cooking class. Thank you.
Well, here we are in the weekly kitchen. Looks like the ladies are getting ready to make breakfast. Would you like to tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, but first off, over here we're making strawberry rhubarb muffins for breakfast. Test out our new cast iron muffin pan.
Hi, and here we're going to be mixing our flour and our sugar, and we're going to use that with our strawberries, and we're going to have a little surprise this morning. Thank you.
Hi, I got breakfast here already. Scrambled eggs and sausage links and these little round donuts that I don't know how to pronounce the name of. What do you call them?
Skeever.
Yeah, these things.
Well, I'll have to come back later on and try breakfast.
Oh, they're really
I'm ready.
okay. Welcome to Columbia Schoolhouse. It was built in 1860, and the first teacher that we know of started in 1889 in January, Anna Finlay. She was 16 years old. She had gone to school. She had completed her 8 levels of education and sat for an exam and was certified to teach. So there was 6 students that first winter. And they had 2 last names, so there's 2 families that were represented. And before that, we don't know any of the teachers. There's no other recorded history of who went to school here, but that year, from that point on. Anna stayed in the state of Wisconsin until she retired, and she helped develop the Wisconsin superintendent position, which she then worked as, and that's what she retired from. So when she started, they began with about a $2 a month salary. She stayed in the homes of her students. And so 1 month she'd be with one family and then she'd move to the next family. So it wasn't a burden on more than one. And she had to walk. Usually she could not be accompanied by unchaperoned, so she had to spend a lot of time by herself. And so she'd leave before sunrise in the morning to get here to start the lamp and build the fire, so it was somewhat hospitable and warm when the students arrived. And then they had a lot of natural light because of the oil or the gas lamps were an expensive way to light it. So as soon as it got enough natural light, then she would shut those off and just go with that's why they usually have 4 windows, which have been remodeled and they've been removed here. So, but to keep the ambiance of it, that's why we don't even have all the lights lit. They started the mornings off with the students reciting, and she would sit up here and the younger ones would recite from their readers, their one book readers, and she would help them with their words, and they'd cover all the subjects from basically this one book. Even she'd bring in geography or whatnot. They'd learn to draw maps and of their local town and where their farms were located to the school, and then it would grow from there. So, but it all came out of basically the one books. When the first level was done reciting, then they would return to their seat and work on the next day's lessons. And then the second graders, or the second grade or level, would recite, and the process would repeat itself until into the afternoon. When they'd finish up with the 8th grader, and then it was very common to end up with a spelling bee almost every day based on their assignments. And so it was an efficient way to learn because you kept hearing these same things over and over again, and so the first graders could compete, with spelling after a little bit with the 8th graders in the spelling bee.
Interesting.
So that was kind of the day.
Yeah.
Because the teachers were very young, she was not usually about the same age as some of the older boys that would be in school. The boys would start in October because of farm chores and responsibilities at home, and usually leave by March. And so if they wanted to be out of school, usually by 12, they would try to complete more than one level even in 1 year. And which it was possible if there's only one person in 6th or 7th grade. You could go.
Pretty small classroom sizes.
Yes.
Do you know what these holes are in the desks?
Oh yes, that's for ink wells.
Cool.
Hopefully that didn't walk out the door. Yeah, here. There, it's a little ink wells we put in here, and then I have a little ink. And that was saved for very special things that once they've accomplished, their cursive writing or whatever, and then they would use paper. But most of the time in the early years, the ink was too expensive to worry about, so they used the slates, of course, and the chalk.
Yep.
And then when they got for practice, when they got it down pat, then they could use the ink. It was part of the teacher's responsibility to make sure that they were supplied with the powdered ink. It came in a form of a powder, so she'd have to mix it with water and keep the little bottles filled.
Sure.
It's part of her job. But in the winter, she'd have to start the fire to melt the water so they'd have something to drink all day. Because at night, of course, it would freeze in here.
When you catch that, melt the water. I'm like,
Melt
how would
the
you melt
ice,
the water
sorry.
in?
Melt the ice to make water
Well,
so
yeah.
they could drink.
Yeah.
And at night she'd have to empty the crock because, ice, when it turns to ice, it expands and it busts, and she'd have to replace it.
So I suppose she's stoking the fire to keep the place
Right,
warm as well as
and
teaching.
that was part of her job too. And of course the older boys would help with the wood and bring it in at night. And
Yeah.
so it helped her, she could keep it dry, kindling. this little box back there is kind of fun. That's a traveling library. They didn't have the luxury of the libraries that we have nowadays. And so once a month, a new box of books would come. And so there was something to look forward to. And then they would have additional reading, choices other than just their boring little readers that they heard day in and day out. Oh, no, lunch pails, of course. Everybody had a lunch pail. And if they had like a mason jar or something where they had food in it, they could set it on the stove with the water in here and heat it up. So they had a little bit of a hot lunch.
Nice. Can you imagine only 6 people being in your classroom, Hunter?
Usually one per grade,
He's like-
Yeah, so if you'd be the only one in your class, it was not uncommon.
Wow. Huh. Interesting.
This was something that I remember taking when I went to one-room schoolhouses. We had goiter pills. Anybody ever hear of them? Goiter pill? You don't take a goiter pill? Well, I'll tell you why. Goiter pills. A goiter is a gland in the side of the neck, and it was very common in these Midwestern states. For even the Native Americans suffered with this. Because the soil did not contain enough iodine, and they didn't have any sources like seafood, which has a lot of iodine in the salt waters, has iodine. But so if it was always freshwater land covered with freshwater, the soil was depleted from iodine, and so they grow these glands on the side of their neck would enlarge. So in the 1930s, to get down to my point here, the government got together and sent out what was called goiter pills to all the one-room schoolhouses, and it was actually just iodine mixed with some little carob or chocolate tasting things, flavor, and then every Friday we'd take a goiter pill. You either loved them or you hated them. And then if you hated them, then you trade and, give them to your friends. But then Mr. Morton got this idea and he put iodine in salt, and so now we have iodized salt and no longer have to take goiter pills.
When did they stop the goiter pills?
I took them in '63, so.
I was in the 40s and 50s, so I remember them too. They did taste like chocolate, so
Yeah.
I didn't mind it.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
You must have been from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We didn't see any of that in Ohio.
No.
But we had an apple day.
Is there a reason the desks are on those ski boards, or is that just how they were transported?
I think that they were, otherwise, it was back in the really early years, they were right down to the floor.
Sure.
They were attached to the floor, and so this makes them so that it can be cleaned and
Yeah.
more versatile. But, and also, once they started using the schoolhouse for other things, even when it became a town hall, so they could push the school chairs aside and put in regular seating. Regular chairs, folding chairs or whatnot. But it wasn't uncommon for the schoolhouses to be used for different events of the city, of the townships. They'd use them for Wednesday night prayer meeting and even church service on Sunday. And it was usually part of the school teacher's job, written right in her contract, that she had to attend and be part of that event, those events too. So.
Cool. Interesting. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Wish my